Hey folks, welcome to another episode of Fighting Matters. I'm Jeff Shaw from Bellingham BJJ. With me as usual, Steve Kwan from BJJ Mental Models, Mike Mahaffey from Magic BJJ, and today we have a special guest that I'm super excited to talk to. Karen Attiah was at the Washington Post for 11 years, where she was the founding editor of the Global Opinions section. She also won the very prestigious Polk Award for commentary there, a thing I want to ask you about later on. She also taught race and media at Columbia University, and perhaps most impressive to you if you're listening to this, was also a silver medalist at the U.S. Muay Thai Open. And so Karen has had an interesting several weeks, and we'd like to welcome you to the show. Thank you so much for taking the time, and maybe we can start with what happened last month.
Yeah, thanks for having me, you guys. It's so cool to be on I know I'm in a sea of jiu-jitsu folks. But yeah,
I used
happy
to hit
talk
people
about
too.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
you're
yeah.
one of us.
Yes.
I've done a little bit of BJJ. We could talk about that. But yeah, in terms of like the real life jiu-jitsu I've been doing over the last couple of weeks. Yeah, as you said, I have been a journalist, probably honestly in a way since college, 15 or so years ago. And yeah, I started at the Washington Post about 11 years ago, and I've been in the opinion section my whole career. So I started off as like a digital producer. I actually started off as a social media kind of producer and editor in a lot of ways, in the opinion section, then moved up to working in or kind of creating my own job really and becoming the global opinions editor. So I was responsible for recruiting writers from around the world to write for us, and basically almost like share their large audiences with the American audience, and sort of vice versa, and then in 2021, moved on from that to become a columnist myself. So I wore a lot of hats in the opinion section. So again, I keep stressing the opinion section, meaning for a lot of people who might not know, in the realm of journalism, in particular at the Washington Post, we have a sort of, we actually used to call it a Chinese wall between the news side and the opinion side. So the news side reporters, they often do the who, what, when, where, why. They aren't supposed to have opinions, are supposed to sort of leave themselves out of the story. Whereas opinion journalists, uh, editorial writers, we get the latitude to be able to say what we think. Of course, analyze facts. Many of the columnists were reporters. I was actually a reporter for the AP before I joined the Post. So I'm just giving a whole bunch of context, and then we'll come to the present. So yeah, a large part of, my job was to help other people express their opinions clearly in the Washington Post, even and especially those opinions that I didn't agree with, right? And then later, my job was to write opinion in the pages, obviously, and then, yeah, of course, with the advent of social media, part of our jobs is to be out there in the public discourse, to sort of, we understood that like public opinion was happening on Twitter and on social media, on Instagram, Facebook. So it definitely was sort of almost becoming expected that we would be active out there, to be thought leaders, all that jazz. So yeah, for me, when I became a columnist, a lot of my work focused specifically on sort of race, gender, culture, human rights, international affairs, fig trees, martial arts. Sometimes I got a wide range of freedom, really, until last month. So, of course, September 10th was the shooting death of Charlie Kirk in Utah, as well as, and I keep reminding people of this, there was the shootings of school children in Colorado, literally at the very same time. So for me, I'm watching the reports coming in through social media. Obviously, the Charlie Kirk shooting. I knew of Charlie Kirk. I knew of his position as this, firebrand activist, and obviously we'll get into, his stances and his words probably later. But I knew, holy crap, this is going to be a big deal. There was already sort of wild accusations and speculations on both sides. My job, my training as a journalist, particularly when there's a heated, fast-breaking news event, particularly a violent, fast-breaking news event, is that you refrain from really speculating, getting ahead of the facts, stuff like that. So I was on Blue Sky. I've been on Blue Sky because Twitter has basically shadow banned me. So my social media weapon of choice lately has been Blue Sky. So I was on Blue Sky and seeing these reports, and all I could think about was like, geez, America. Again, here we have this gun violence. We have, shooting of children a couple weeks before, the CDC building getting shot up hundreds of times. In June, the shooting deaths of Melissa Hortman, the lawmaker in Minnesota, her husband, and her dog. And for me, just looking at the reactions to, specifically to Charlie Kirk, of course, there's a lot of rhetoric like, political violence has no place here. This is not who we are. Thoughts and prayer, that's sort of like anti-cliche. And so for me, I mean, it's just seeing what was happening. Again, children being shot, and it's just like, political violence shouldn't have a place here. Murder is wrong, but it does exist here. It's been a part of America since its founding. And specifically, I said, part of what keeps America so violent, and this was actually in reference to the Melissa Hortman shootings. Part of what keeps America so violent is the expectation of like performing absolution, care, empty goodness for white men who commit violence and espouse hatred. And so I basically was just like, I mean, most of my posts were just like about our empty rhetoric. And again, the FBI, the DOJ, there's been long documented evidence of the one's demographic that is most likely to carry out these mass shootings and political extremist violence is white men, young white men. So those are just facts. And so I said that, and people, responded, but there's no backlash. Someone accused me of saying that I was condoning violence by talking in generalities about violence, that I was condoning what happened to Kirk. And I responded, refusing to performatively tear my clothes off and smear ashes on my face in, excessive mourning for a white man who espoused violence is not the same as violence. And that person deleted their comments, scattered away. But I left that post up because I was like, that's just facts. I mean, it's, as a journalist, understanding that Kirk was, for some people, clearly like a saint to a good amount of people. I think a lot of us might have actually been surprised at how many people saw him as this, like, almost a saint of free speech and a Christian knight, almost. And then obviously, you go back and you look at his actual words where he's against the Civil Rights Act, where he called Black women out of their names, just saying that they were DEI hires and lacked brain processing power, specifically for Michelle Obama and Ketanji Brown Jackson, all that stuff. And have put academics on watch lists. Like, it would have been irresponsible of me to overly mourn someone like that. Like, that just would have been controversial and wrong. And as a Black woman, especially, like, I cannot do that, but not doing that is not the same as saying what he deserved what he got. I thought that was just like clear. So I know this is a long story, but I hope you're still with me. So I go on about my day. And like I said, I actually told people like, look, guys, we don't even know who the shooter is. We don't know the motivations. There's so much crap on both sides, like speculating. And so, I mean, I was just doing my job, until the next day. I actually, this is an interesting part of this story. I was actually in Dallas, and I was actually drilling Muay Thai at Rangers MMA actually, and I was actually it's on my social media. I guess I was drilling with Macy Chiasun before her fight.
You just won last night by decision.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, she fought last night. So I was actually doing a few rounds with her with in Muay Thai. And after we finished, I saw a missed call from a Washington Post number, and I was like, okay. And then a few minutes later, email like notice of termination. Um, and no conversation, no nothing. After 11 years, the letter accused me of, it was citing my Blue Sky post, accused me of gross misconduct, of endangering the physical safety of my colleagues, all because they claimed that I violated their social media policy by basically by mentioning white men and disparaging in the aftermath of Kirk, disparaging based on quote unquote protected characteristics. Again, I keep saying, anyone can go back to my Blue Sky posts and you'll see that I did not say all white men. I did not say some white men. I didn't say a fraction. I said the violent white men and those who espouse hatred. I don't think all white men are violent. I actually don't. But the Washington Post, in their sort of tortured logic, again, was making it out to seem that either mentioning that violent white men are to be protected, which proves my point that I was making, or you know, they or what is the and they cited those two posts where I talked about not tearing my clothes and um not and again, the normalization of violence by coddling those white men who perpetuate the violence. So yeah. So that's how my 11 years of writing about race and culture, of standing up for press freedom, even, when my own safety was on the line, when my writer Jamal Khashoggi was murdered, that's how that came to an end. Obviously, I reject their reasoning. Again, this idea that me as a woman should have torn my clothes, and that would have meant I would have kept my job is a weird thing to think. But um, yeah, it's been a lot to process. I decided to post this myself. Even decided to post my own termination letter for the whole world to see. Um, but yeah, in a lot of ways, I'm still like coming to terms with um just coming to terms with that. So that's the story, the full story.
Yeah,
You,
you've
s-
covered a lot of ground there, and I want to follow up on a lot of things about free speech in America, about Jamal Khashoggi, who you recruited to the Washington Post, and the all the events there. But I want to also lift up one thing you said. So you were fired by email without a conversation after 11 years, and you've posted the letter to your Substack, which is called The Golden Hour, for anybody who wants to check it out, in addition to the posts that they found objectionable. So we might be able to put a link to that in the show notes if
mm,
anybody wants to check it out. But as Karen has mentioned, she's put it out there for the whole world to see. And you might imagine my interpretations of your posts are much the same as yours, where this is an opinion writer expressing commentary on contemporary events. And so I suppose I'll ask, what, irrespective, as an opinion writer and the founding editor of Global Opinions, you worked with a lot of writers with a lot of different perspectives, many of whom you did not agree with, some of whom were from different cultures, were from international cultures, things of that nature. What does a move like this say about free speech in America?
yeah. I think if there's one thing that's been so heartbreaking for me about this in a way isn't even about me. It's about the writers that I worked with, that the Global Opinions team sort of brought in. I mean, a number of writers were writers who came to the Washington Post from around the world because they couldn't find spaces to write in their own countries. So I had writers from Turkey. Anyone who follows Turkish politics knows under Erdogan, um, the space for dissent. I mean, Turkey was, if it's not still is, was one of the world's leading jailers of journalists for a good part of the last 10 years. So we had writers from Turkey. We had writers from, obviously, Jamal, Saudi Arabia. We even had, writers who were in quote unquote like liberal democracies, but their points of views just could not get a fair hearing, in their countries. Some I think of Rakaya Diallo, who wrote from France, she's Black, feminist, Muslim, who's constantly challenged in France. And so I think part of it is for a lot of people around the world. Obviously, the United States' story about itself has been, we are this place of freedom. We are this place of the First Amendment where you can speak. And for a lot of writers, I mean, that is true relatively compared to their own societies, right? So in the Post, and especially what we built, also shout out to my other editors, Eli Lopez. We built this big team to be able to have this platform. And it's like, for a lot of folks, they saw that as their home to write and to still express themselves and to protect them sometimes from authoritarian forces that were trying to discredit them. And then they could say, hey, but I'm in the Washington Post. Um, so I think the Post, in a lot of ways, at least for a time, stood him as an example of free speech in America. I will go so far as to say that, um, so it's been heartbreaking to even talk with my, former writers who are on the team, and they're like, "Where do we go now? Where can we be heard now?" And it's just, or some who will say like, "Hey, Karen, your team, that was the first time we were ever able to be heard in mainstream media." And so, um, obviously it's like, okay, proud of anyone who's been an editor or a writer, like, what it means to have someone give you a chance, so I'm proud of that, but I'm also sad that the Post has chosen to abandon that and to dismantle that.
In your opinion, how much does media ownership matter? I have my own thoughts on this, but I would love to hear your educated opinion. You mentioned Twitter/X, which is owned by one of the richest people in the world, the Washington Post, owned by one of the richest people in the world. We have CBS News being purchased. We've been talking about media monopolies and consolidation for a long time, but as someone who has been there, how much do you think media ownership matters in this?
Hmm. Well, the fact that, um, I mean, uh, like I said, I mean, I came up, I got my jobs through Twitter. Like I just, that was, I never went to journalism school. I didn't, have fancy real journalism connections. No journalism nepo baby here. My parents are immigrants from West Africa. Like, so Twitter very specifically was my path. And I would definitely say once Elon Musk bought that place, it was like night and day. Um, and I feel it feels so first world problems to be complaining about having a large audience, and then all of a sudden, your engagement drops. But it's like precipitous. I mean, I would be lucky now to get, I don't know, 6,000. I mean, that sounds like a lot, I know, but I have near like 250,000 followers on Twitter. But there was definitely some switch that got flipped, that like voices like mine being suppressed and just right-wing bots, the place is infested with bots. Um, like it's damn near unusable for me. And Musk was very explicit in what sort of speech he didn't want and didn't like. Anyone talking about decolonization, social justice, whatever they deemed to be woke, they got basically like deplatformed. So seeing that in real time was a real like warning sign, I suppose. And obviously, and I'm glad you guys talk about media consolidation and monopolies, because I don't think a lot of Americans really sit and consider that like so much of our media, and when we say media, it's TV, it's also book publishing, it's social media, it is newspapers are owned by so few people and firms right now, that it's a small group of people, and men mostly, are controlling what people are able to see. So I guess right now, seeing the acceleration of that, and that someone like a Barry Weiss can go from uh like being someone crusading against like uh academics and crying about woke culture all the time, to now, you know, multi-million-dollar deal and be head of CBS News. Like, to me, also speaks to how like the right in particular puts their money where their mouths are, literally. And the asymmetry in the media war and landscape is just so stark. So yeah, I mean, I would say for my time at the Post, I mean, look, like it's been a 180. I mean, I started at a place where freedom of speech and advocating for democracy and having a wide range of views was very much the culture. Bezos himself would come to the office and say, "I want y'all to be swashbucklers." He was very involved in the whole "democracy dies in darkness" slogan. And so now to go to having a narrow um scope of what is you're allowed to talk about is pretty stunning. I mean, this is the type of stuff that my writers in quote unquote other countries were fleeing from.
Speaking of one of those writers, you mentioned Jamal Khashoggi. I think everybody on this call understands the significance of that reference, but for listeners who might not, Saudi writer, dissident, who you recruited to the Post, and was murdered in the Saudi embassy by agents of the Saudi government. And what's interesting, and I'd like, uh, to ask a broad question about this, but I want to highlight that for those of us that are in the jiu-jitsu world, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates are extremely involved in jiu-jitsu. And in fact, Sheikh Tamim bin Zayed, who was instrumental in the founding of ADCC, was the foreign minister from UAE. He talked with Saudi Arabia in the wake of this murder, of this political murder. And I don't like, I hate it when people just ask guests, "Can you talk about that?" But like, what a watershed moment in world opinion and world press freedom. And I'm curious if you could tell us what you think is most significant about those events to you, and things that readers and listeners may not know about.
Yeah. So it's actually significant that we are talking about Jamal, because just a few days ago, on the 2nd, was the 7th anniversary of his murder. So it was 7 years ago, almost to the day that we found out he was murdered. And just for a bit of context, like, uh, again, I was new to being a global opinions editor, and my mandate was try to find the premier voices from around the world who can help explain what's going on in their part of the world. So around that time, and this is what, like about 2017 or so, Trump is in his first few months of office, And we're also seeing, anyone following the Middle East is also seeing this new figure come up on the world scene of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. He's a millennial, reported to be actually around my age, and he's making these tours around the world's capitals and basically saying, I am transforming Saudi Arabia from this primitive image with religious police and where women can drive into quote unquote modern Saudi Arabia, right? So that was the backdrop, and we had he'd come to Washington and he was presenting this sleek image to all the journalists and uh, to lawmakers and things like that, and also trying to get them to invest in his vision for the new Saudi Arabia, right? Like it's called Vision 2030 at the time. So you have this happening. Trump's in office. Mohammed bin Salman is on the scene. He has, like, how do we put it? He has viciously climbed his way to the top, imprisoned his uncle, was imprisoning critics, ended up in like silencing the women who even fought for the right to drive when Saudi Arabia announced that they were going to allow women to drive. And I remember seeing, I was like, that'd be interesting to try to get one of them to write. I tried. I couldn't. They had been told to shut up by the royal family. So that's like the backdrop under which I recruited Jamal Khashoggi. Jamal Khashoggi, and a lot of people don't know this, actually. He was banned from writing in Saudi Arabia. He was a very prominent editor, was actually very close to the Saudi royal family. So he was an insider. He was banned from writing because he criticized Donald Trump, actually. It wasn't because of sort of directly going after Mohammed bin Salman. It actually was because he was a bit critical of the kingdom getting so close with a figure like Donald Trump. And for that, he was banned from writing for a year. So he comes to the Post. The piece that he wrote with me in 2017 was the first time he'd spoken since being banned. So it went viral. It was a huge deal. He was trending in the Middle East, like, for speaking out. And I say that, all to say, and then we end up working together for a year until he was murdered. He was murdered almost to the month a year later after we started working together. So, for readers to think about this in the context of Saudi Arabia and even what Saudi Arabia is now, right? I think as we're speaking, Saudi Arabia is hosting the Riyadh Comedy Festival. A number of A-list celebrities, U.S. comedy celebrities from here are, yucking it up. Dave Chappelle claiming that he feels freer to speak over there. I know that the Saudis have been pretty active in trying to use sports, especially as a way to we call it sports washing, like sports wash their image. So Live Golf, WWE has been big. Boxing, I believe, right? The Canelo Crawford fight, if I'm not mistaken. So it's been really, to me, it's been really, obviously, it's been really interesting in general, like the marriage between kind of UFC, fighting sports, wrestling, and like the Trump administration, especially, but then also how that's being used as a way to bolster sort of Saudi Arabia's like cultural ties to us, right? I haven't done, enough digging as to like, I mean, what other sort of countries, cultures, Saudi Arabia kind of trying to borrow from and use, but particularly like the fighting sports is quite interesting to me. And I mean, I use interesting in a very general. By interesting, I also mean like appalling. But if it wasn't for the fact that I've had this horrible front row experience to Saudi Arabia's repression, it is just objectively interesting. And that oh my goodness, the wrestler, Bianca, what's her name?
Bianca Belair.
Yes, who I think a few weeks ago
Jeff,
was
I think we
like
just outed
talking.
ourselves, the
Yeah,
wrestling fans here on the
we're
podcast.
big
But yes,
wrestling
I
nerds,
was a
Karen.
wrestling fan too. I grew up
Let's go.
watching. I grew up watching WCW and WWE Monday Night Raw. So like this actually is like kind of near and dear to me. Like I grew up
Do
watching
I
all
have to
this stuff.
leave this
No,
show
no,
because
just
I'm
be
not?
silent, Mike. But like,
Okay, got it.
I actually, and Karen, one thing I want to talk to you about, because I'd seen in some of your writing references to China. Like you had a great piece in August about your experience putting on muscle and how
Mm.
you'd grown up admiring gymnasts that are muscular, and China, and I forget some of the other folks that you met, Shira, Pippi Longstocking. And I do want to talk to you about that when we talk, because this is a chance to segue into your experience with fight sports. But it's fascinating. I think that you're absolutely right to identify the connection between business leaders in both of these countries and the fight sports, WWE, Titan Sports, UFC, and I would add jujitsu to that as well.
Jiu-jitsu. I'm not as now I'm curious. I'm not as familiar with like Saudi Arabia and UAE with jiu-jitsu, but it's in general it's like the jiu-jitsu world, and I guess its expansion is interesting to me. But yeah, I mean, just it's it's just unfortunate as well that that these sports and these sports figures are aligning themselves with such like repressive regimes. I mean, I think, and you know, we can get into it later, but like, I don't know, I grew up like heroes to me, fighting heroes were the ones who fought against oppression, who fought like for the people, who fought to like rescue women from people who wanted to keep them caged and things like that. And so it's kind of like the capture, I guess, in the marriage between like authoritarianism and the fighting world is just so mm, it's dispiriting again, at the same time fascinating, and at the same time kind of like, wait, what about those of us who like care about human rights? Like, uh, why have we ceded these space? I don't know if that's the right way to look at it, but yeah, like all like the childhood heroes, it's like, uh, we grew up like fighting for humanity, not
it is
just
fascinating to watch. I mean, just for context, I actually didn't know this, but through my company, BJJ Mental Models, we're doing a documentary right now on the history of authoritarianism and the dark side of it, and how it's intertwined with martial arts in the past. And I didn't realize this until I started hearing some of the work that was produced under this label of ours. But this is not a new thing. I mean, appealing to that demographic and using sports, especially the combat arts, as a vehicle for recruitment for an authoritarian regime. I mean, this goes back to pretty much the beginning of recorded history. It's not a new thing, and I think this touches on something you mentioned earlier, which is, man, for all of this talk about, whenever there's a shooting, there's this race to blame either the left or the right. And look, we can talk about that, but I think the real problem, which you touched on, which many people aren't willing to just say straight up, is before we even talk about left or right, this is a disenfranchised young male problem, right? That is the majority of people who are conducting this kind of violence. And I think there is, and I hate to say it as a longtime martial artist who loves the fight sports, but there has always been that thread tying through it. I think to some extent there's a part of the people who train this, including us, who there's the appeal of the strong, badass warrior. And sometimes, it's easy to get your wires crossed, and you look at these authoritarian regimes, and I think some people see strength. I think that's the appeal of things like the Trump administration to a lot of young people. I mean, the merits of what they're doing is less relevant than the fact that they show strength. The show of strength seems to be its own reward. I mean, I just look at all of the performative stuff with the UFC, especially being basically a propaganda outlet right now at this point in time. I've never seen a sports company that has been so intertwined with the political movement before at this kind of level in the States. And yeah, in Saudi Arabia, a great example of that. And just seeing how quickly, especially the comedians, really surprised me. I mean, with athletes, as much as I disagree with it, I can understand how they could be motivated or strong-armed into supporting a movement like this. But I mean, a lot of these comedians just 5 years ago were railing against free speech limitations in the States. And now they're going and signing agreements. I mean, and copies of some of the agreements that have been proposed are out there and have been circulated. I mean, basically prohibiting you from criticizing the government that you're performing for. There was at least one comedian who had signed and agreed to go, and I think on his podcast or somewhere had made some critical comment, and the Saudis revoked his offer. And so not only are they censoring his speech on stage in their country, they're expecting his speech to be moderated at home as well. In America, that is a chilling effect, right? And that goes to show how dangerous it is to allow this kind of cultural sport washing, because again, if throwing bags of money at these people will prevent some of the strongest critics from speaking up, I mean, my God, what are we going to do, right? It just that was really surprising to me to see how quickly the comedians folded after the last 5 years of rallying around the importance of free speech.
You
Karen,
make
I have
really, really good points.
I have a question for you. It's something I've been stuck on for the last 30 or so minutes. Back to what the incident with the Washington Post. You had stated one of the things that triggered them to terminate your employment was that you were talking about the prevalence of young white men in political violence. Is that right?
Well, they're stated examples of me violating their social media policy against bias, and disparagement was mentioning white men.
Wasn't there recently some data just removed from the Department of Justice website about political violence and the vast majority of it being committed by white men on the right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So I was like, wow, yes,
you were
a few
spitting
days after I was
facts.
fired.
Yeah, you were spitting facts and then got fired for that. I'm incensed. I'm sorry, Karen. I don't mean to take that from you. That's your stuff to be incensed about, but I'm just pissed off about that.
It's
like
wild.
how much
Well,
I
it's
mean,
crazy too, because Mike, if you remember, around the exact same time this happened to you, Karen, there were folks on Fox News declaring war on the left. They were talking about rounding up and killing homeless people. Those people are still there. They're still employed, right? So there is a serious double standard that is being held here. And that's the scary thing. I mean, Karen, I think you talked about this beautifully earlier. You know, free speech is incredibly important, but we don't talk enough about the power of free speech and who provides the platform. A lot of these big companies, I mean, yeah, we all technically have free speech, but a lot of these major companies are using the power that they've got to put their thumb on the scale and control what kind of free speech gets amplified. Again, X is a great example of that, right? I mean, good luck trying to speak out on any progressive cause on X. You're going to get buried algorithmically. So that environment makes free speech almost impossible when it is biased towards one particular message. You're getting incredibly violent rhetoric coming from extremists on the right. On the left, I have not heard a single notable person celebrate anything that happened to Charlie Kirk. I mean, for all of the talk about this on the right, other than a few completely anonymous lunatics on social media, I have not seen a single prominent person celebrate this in any way. Meanwhile, when you look around when you flip this around, I mean, when violence gets inflicted against people on the left, I mean, you'll see the president's son celebrating this on Twitter, right? It's a completely different double standard. And I think we've got to talk about how hard it is to truly have free speech in an environment like that where the scales are so tipped on one side.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think about that a lot. I'm like, gosh, if I was not a black woman saying these things, would I have actually, gotten in trouble? Yeah, and Mike, and to your point, I mean, the the instances of the firing, and then literally, I think it was just a few days later, maybe 2 or 3 days later, after I announced my termination, and then the news about the DOJ scrubbing that report about right wing extremist violence making up the vast majority of political violence in this country, made me think, oh my goodness, like, are we headed towards a future, not just freedom of speech, but where facts literally get erased from the public record, to where we those of us who have the memories of these FBI reports, these DOJ reports, the government to be can basically say that didn't happen, that doesn't exist, right? This is getting to the point where it's like also freedom of information, even those, like, I think for me, I mean, yeah, as shocking and unfair as my firing was, I think about the really chilling precedent that this sets for my colleagues who still remain at the Washington Post, for opinion journalists as well, and three, for anyone who actually wants to do research on political violence in this country. It is just a fact that there are racial frames to it, not just in the commission of the violence, again, as you guys are saying, in the media, who is allowed to talk about killing homeless people and still just kind of being sorry and going about their day. To, I'm thinking about the educators, I'm thinking about the researchers who study this stuff so that we can understand and hopefully, like, fix these issues. Like, what if we're heading towards a future where that becomes illegal? Right? Where, and or where, yeah, we're not allowed to talk about white men. And anyone who's followed my work knows that I've talked about all various groups, whether it's black men, white women, black women, like, that's just for me, like, talking about young white men, and not just the young white men, but it's our reactions to them, what is permissible. Um, that wasn't disparaging, that was descriptive. Um, I don't personally think that white men is a negative thing, but the way that the Post letter reads, it's like, you said white men, and that's a negative bias thing. I'm like, whoa. Hey, I didn't say that. Again, I said violent white men. So I'm still curious. Obviously, I reject that. I think it's ridiculous, but I think there's a broader pattern here. And if you listen to the rhetoric, particularly coming out of the right, that's been happening, even from Musk, and these ideas of, just the anti-woke stuff and white replacement theories, and it's really chilling. And again, to see researchers who work on this stuff being laid off, or fired, purged, and to see the actual information being purged from government databases, we're entering into really, really dangerous territory where we won't even be able to trust our government on collecting statistics, right?
For me, it's a question of power, and that unifies these two threads of democracy and combat sports. And Karen, that harkens back to something you talked about earlier. As a fighter and a fight fan, nobody roots for Goliath, right? You're never like, my favorite fight ever was when that guy everybody knew was going to win, beat the crap out of that white belt. That's the best fight of all time. If you think that there's something wrong with you, right? Everybody should like an underdog. And similarly, in the public sphere, some folks just have more power than others, right? The homeless people that Brian Kilmeade was advocating the murder of do not have as much power as Brian Kilmeade, and that's a fact, and we can be honest about that. And if we're serious about free speech, and if we're serious about combat sports and equity and fairness, then if you can create a place where the oppressed members of society have the same ability to speak as the folks that are non-oppressed, or the folks that have more power, you have created a free speech environment. If you don't, you haven't. And if you are watching fights and rooting for the person that has all the power, all the resources, if you're rooting for Ivan Drago in Rocky IV, you're doing it wrong. And so I'm curious, like, how does that land with you as someone who's been involved in combat sports for the whole basically the whole of your adult life, it sounds like. And do you have lessons from combat sports that you draw in the rest of your working life and your life as a human being?
Yeah. I find that interesting because, again, my mind immediately triggers to my time watching Monday Night Raw wrestling. I also grew up playing a lot of fighting games, Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, Soul Calibur, which a lot of people don't know because I kept myself buttoned up, I guess, for the Washington Post. But like, yeah, I was a gamer. And I find what you said interesting about nobody roots for Goliath, because immediately I was like, are you sure? Is that true? Because I think about like, oh my goodness, I don't know, Andre the Giant, or goodness, who is it Paul like the
The
7 foot
Undertaker?
tall, the Undertaker,
Yeah.
Are
or
you thinking of
like,
the Big Show, Paul White?
yes.
There you go. Okay.
Big, yes. They're big, and we just like to see them like manhandle the smaller guy, because it's just like they're literal Goliaths. And when someone gets in their chokehold and the choke slam and like,
Well, this is what makes wrestling interesting, though,
Mm.
from my perspective, because, like, Nobody Roots for Goliath, which, by the way, is the title of Wilt Chamberlain's autobiography, great autobiography. But, like, generally speaking, if you see a bigger, stronger person, you're like, I hope that guy beats up the weaker person. But on the other hand, this is what makes wrestling storytelling interesting, and I'm thrilled that you're conversant in this, is that you can take traits and assign a character those traits that make them the babyface, the good guy, or the heel, the bad guy. And if you were watching, sounds like you were watching WWE during the Mr. McMahon versus
Yeah.
Stone Cold Steve Austin
Yes.
era, if you were rooting for Mr. McMahon, there was something wrong with you. He was the evil boss who did all sorts
Right.
of horrific stuff to the Secretary of
Both
Education.
in
which I
scripted
think is
reality,
wrong.
or both in scripted entertainment and in real life, actually, Jeff.
Yeah,
it
no,
turns
I mean,
out.
Right.
art
I
imitates
saw the
life.
Netflix doc,
Yeah.
on McMahon's. Yeah, and it's like I I wish I had gotten to write about this for the Post, but I keep saying, I'm like, man, to understand our moment that we're in America, to understand Trump, to understand why like Linda McMahon has been elevated to, these heights, Secretary of Education. I'm like, you have to understand wrestling culture, because it's such a powerful storytelling tool, and like such a powerful tool for promoting nationalism, promoting gender narratives, for promoting, which is why I thought China was so freaking cool, because like she was like buff as shit, and like was like manhandling men, and was winning like championships and stuff. And then that translates into the video game world, where then you get to like embody these same narratives. For the record, my favorite wrestler was Sting. I thought he was like
You'll be
everything.
you'll be
And it's
Sting and Rey
crazy that up
Mysterio.
until like a year ago, he was still wrestling.
well,
I know.
you'll be thrilled to know, though, that Sting turns out to be one of the very few elite wrestlers that turns out to be a fundamentally decent person, according
Yeah.
to basically everybody. So
Yeah, I chose my imaginary wrestling husband well. So so
I'm learning I just have
yeah.
to watch wrestling now. That's what I'm getting from this.
To understand the Trump administration, you must understand pro wrestling, Mike. I saw a photo from the Oval Office the other day, and it had Donald Trump with his Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon, and one of his sports consultants, Paul Triple H Levesque, and Stephanie McMahon. There's 4 people in the photo, and I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, I'm pretty sure I've seen Stone Cold Steve Austin beat up all of these people. Like, there is something out of the WWE playbook and I mean, Trump is a WWE Hall of Famer, right? He is a longtime combat sports guy. He's a showman. And that kind of psychology, you see that in terms of how he presents himself, right? He's always, even though he's the president and controls all levers of power at the moment, if you listen to him talk, he's still the underdog, the victim in everything. He's still the baby face, right? And that type of psychology apparently works in politics. We're seeing it right now.
Yeah, it works. And people keep forgetting. I mean, I grew up with Donald Trump very much in the culture, very much playing multiple roles. I mean, I think his turn as president is the ultimate turning heel role. But yeah, and I just think that particularly with wrestling, and I mean we could get into like actual individual like combat sports, but particularly with wrestling, the theatrics of it the profound like storytelling and the characters that you get to make, as well as, I mean, you know, these people are putting their bodies on the line every night. Like they are facing certain peril and death. I mean, you know, you have wrestlers that have literally died in front of audiences. I still remember just, you know, the CT, I still remember Chris Benoit, when he like killed his family, killed himself. Like, there's real world stakes for pro wrestlers. And then you also get into, you know, like the steroids and the like. There's so much about pro wrestling that is about politics, and is about like, you know, anyone from, you know, me, I've got all the fancy degrees and stuff like that. Like, but I'm like, man, that was fun. Like, you know, because you get to release your inner kind of id through those performers. And so I guess for me, like then actually getting into martial arts, I actually played basketball and volleyball in high school, and I enjoyed basketball more because it was like full contact. I was constantly fouling out, like I was constantly hacking people. um, and I think I just kind of realized, I'm like, oh, I guess I just like to tussle a bit. And then in college, like I always just kept active in general. And then in college, I signed up for the boxing club, and I was like, I've never done boxing, but I mean, I'm in shape. Like, let me try something different. And I remember like showing up, and the coach was like, "Cool, you're here. All right, put on your shoes. We're gonna run a mile." And then like next thing you know, then that's just the warm up. And then you're in there, you're hitting pads, and then I nearly died. Like I was like, this is crazy. This is bananas. This is torture. Shit, I love this. I'm coming back. So I was hooked. I started training. I remember just immediately just being like, man, I want to go to the Golden Gloves. Like I remember like stepping into a ring and just, had no business sparring, but I was just like, I just want to see what it's like. I remember getting like my jaw rearranged, and I was like, oh, that hurts. Okay, let me come back and do it again. I don't know what it says about my particular psychology, that there's something to me about, and then from boxing, I started doing Muay Thai, when I moved to DC, so maybe in 2015 or so, because I couldn't really find a boxing gym near me, and someone was like, try Muay Thai, and I was like, I don't know about all that kicking, like punching is already a workout enough, and I tried it, and I was like, oh, okay, this is cool, this is elegant. I think for me, I found Muay Thai to be elegant, like
Why hit
the
people with your hands when you can hit them with anything?
Yeah.
everything, the art of 8 limbs, and grapple them, and you know, and like I also, I think that there's something like aesthetically pleasing to me, and this is, I don't know if it's shallow or superficial, but like aesthetically pleasing to me about the like the outfits, like and even just the spirituality of it, like doing the white crew, even the shorts themselves. I don't know. I just think it looks cool. Again, grew up playing Street Fighter, grew up playing Sagat in Street Fighter. Muay Thai is his fighting art of choice. So I was just like, it's just cool. So I fell in love with that, started doing smokers and exhibitions here in DC. And then when Jamal Khashoggi was killed, I actually when I found out he was dead, I was actually training for a fight. I was actually in the gym. Again, this is a thorough line throughout my life. Like I'm finding out terrible news while I'm training, which I guess I should write down and think about. But um I stopped training for a while because I found it to be too much. Maybe because I was actually dealing with real world violence, and there was something about the simulation of violence for sport that felt off for me at the time. In a way that I don't know. I was like, I'm being not only dealing with this murder, but my security was compromised. The Saudis, I mean, they have more money than God, like, so I was at risk. So it just felt like too much fighting. And so I stopped for a while, and I started again. I was in a relationship that ended up not being good and leaving that relationship. And it was only after I left that relationship that I decided that I was going to start up again. And not only start up again, because I don't do anything halfway. I was like, screw it, I'm getting into the ring. That's my dream. My dream was always to get into the ring and dance with somebody's daughter. So I just decided to go all in at a gym in Dallas, Ohana Warrior Gym. And they were like, hey, if you want to fight, all you got to do is make it through our fight camp and we'll take you to the US Muay Thai Open. And yeah, I started training a lot, actually, probably too much, but like started training like 3 hours a day, did the weight cut, did the whole shebang. And yeah, I went to Arizona for the 2021 US Muay Thai Open, lost in a split decision. And I think I lost in the clinch, and I remember thinking like, ugh, because I went to my boxing, and like I remember thinking like, man, I will never lose in the clinch again. Like, so I didn't have the healthiest attitude towards losing. I was not prepared to lose, so that was a whole other aspect of all this, the mental of it all. You realize, of course, you guys know that so much of this is it's not physical, it's mental, it's spiritual, it's how do you train and uh you release the outcome. I was so focused on getting that belt that like when I didn't, like, and my world fell apart. I was like, I've already like lost, gone through this murder, feeling beat down, feeling powerless in life, gone through this really terrible separation, and like it was just like one more loss, and like kind of broke me a little. And I stepped away from Muay Thai for a while. So it's only now that I'm like getting back into it, and I realize it's like I missed you. Like there's something about for me, I love who I become or who I am when I'm training. Like it's not even so much about, you know, the win or lose. It's like, who am I? I'm disciplined. I'm sort of I'm able to put away the world for a few hours and only focus on myself and my opponent, and my brain gets to work a bit differently. If sometimes it's the only thing that feels real. Here we are, like everything is virtual, everything feels so disconnected. And I say that um well, particularly jiu-jitsu, but I like grappling and Muay Thai. It's like, it's aggressive cuddling. Like, I'm like, oh, this is a way to, I think people who aren't in martial arts maybe don't get it, but it's a profound way to connect with other people. It's a way to, I've trained with, same thing, just like in writing, like in editing, people I disagree with. I've trained with people on the complete opposite side of the political spectrum, across tax brackets, like across ages. Like it's such an equalizer. It's sort of like, okay, I don't really care like what you do, just be respectful, be clean. um and it's like, can you fight or can you train? Like, can you? And it's nice because it just feels like a lot of this kind of superficial stuff that the world cares about doesn't really matter all the time in the gym, when you're training. So yeah, it's definitely it's a huge part of my life, I think, for that reason. And particularly when you get a chance to, I guess at any age, to be able to keep learning new things. And even though there are times where I'm like, man, I've been training for so long and I still suck at, doing a leg sweep, or like I still like, but it's that practice of practice, particularly in this society where people are so used to things coming super quickly. Um, and yeah, it's an antidote in a lot of ways to, and a counterbalance to, especially my job where I live so much in my head, again, where everything is so virtual. Um, like I said, when you get hit in the jaw, I'm like, oh, this is the real world, right? So yeah.
I have a question just following up on that, because I think that's a really profound point about the beauty of martial arts. It is one of the only real things in a world that is getting increasingly online and virtual. For many people in our sport, and I presume in yours as well, people get addicted to it almost, and it becomes kind of like a retreat and like a practice. And it can also become a respite from the real world. A lot of the times, I think people retreat into the martial arts because it is an escape from the drama and the scariness of reality. And I bring this up because I want on this podcast here for us to start really giving people advice about things they can do to actually do in the face of everything we're dealing with. An experience I've noticed with a lot of people in the fight sports is right now, they're really not engaging with the real world or politics. I think a lot of people, they might see what's happening. They might see the attacks on freedom of speech and their civil liberties, and they're retreating away from that. And these are people who are normally brave, right? People who normally, they put their bodies on the line to do a fight sport. But I think in the face of all of this, they're retreating and saying, hey, I just want to focus on jiu-jitsu or whatever my martial art is. I'm not political. I don't do that stuff. But I think now is a time, maybe the most important time in all of our lives, where it's important not to look away, because we may have a very small window of time to actually do something about the slide that we're seeing in society. And you're someone who knows this from all angles. So I'd love to know if someone is listening to this and they're just a martial arts, dork, and they just love training, and the politics fatigues them and they feel overwhelmed and they feel helpless, so they're not engaging. What should those people be doing? What can they really do to actually make a difference and help push back on some of the things that we're seeing to people happen like you within our community?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a really profound question. I mean, I think for me, writing about the things I do and fighting are very intertwined. Like I think the discipline and I guess the sort of courage to be uncomfortable, I think martial arts trains you for that. Like, I mean, I think obviously most people who step into a martial arts gym are not going to compete. I want to say that maybe it's something like 2 or 3% of people who actually spar or step into the ring. But I think if people are conscious, like I think a lot of it has to do with consciousness and awareness. Like I agree that there are people who are using anything really, and there's plenty of ways to escape from what's happening in the real world. But I think part of at least my experience with training for fighting meant that a lot of the work that needs to be done for people to confront these ills in the real world is you have to confront yourself first. And I think there are a lot of people, and and I've trained with a lot of men. I think a lot of men who are trained to avoid themselves, who are trained to avoid like the sort of and there are plenty of people who get into martial arts, I mean, for all sorts of reasons, but many of us, came because we grew up scared and bullied, or in relationships where we were made to feel powerless. And I think particularly in the martial arts community, I think there's like I said, I grew up looking at models of bravery and of fighters who fought for their communities and who fought for weaker people. That was the definition of strength, not domination, but rather to be of service, right? To be of service and to be, I think part of what is a lot wrong with American culture, particularly, we have such narrow ideas of what it means to be a strong person. Like, again, I'm super into like mythology, Greek mythology, myths from around the world, and I think so much of like take Greek mythology, and if you were to look at America's sort of warrior culture right now, you would think that like the only way to be strong is to be like Hercules and to have like bulging biceps and like tear stuff up and all of that. And But I just think of like there were so many other ways to be a man or to be a woman, like different archetypes, and whether that was like, Odysseus being an explorer, using his mind, being cunning, being strategic, fighting, and Bruce Lee, I mean, fighting without fighting, right? You go back and you read his works and watch his films where he's using his mind in order to even avoid fighting in the first place. So all that to say is like, I mean, I personally, I guess the answer to your question, I mean, I think is really a deep cultural, almost spiritual issue we have in the US, that we have such a narrow idea of what it means to be strong, and it means dominating. And of course, like, look at our history, look at whether it's the genocide of Native Americans or the enslavement of Black people, to how we use American might and power abroad. But I guess I would say for individuals, like, I guess honestly, like, the first step is, so much of my fighting has been about introspection, has been about what are my values. I've personally, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but like, I've personally, since I've been training, it has made me just very conscious of my environment, conscious of what I do, conscious of breath, right? And when I've seen someone in danger, like in the streets, I'm thinking of one incident where there was a woman in my apartment complex. Her ex had followed her home, and I remember just sort of being like, okay, this is a situation, assessing, seeing like what is going on, and like gathering some other, and just being able to, again, we weren't fighting, but just using techniques to try to increase the friction of whatever he was trying to do with this woman, right? And so um yeah, I just think at the very least right now, if nothing else, and I don't think everybody needs to be out on the front lines, like out, like a lot of what we need to do is a lot of like inner work right now, right? Like a lot of like this assumption that politics is something that happens to other people, or people who are women, or people who are darker skinned, or who are immigrants. I think what we're going to see is that this is going to come for everyone. And now is the time to get in community. I think part of like what martial arts is very powerful for. In fact, I keep saying that I want to start my own kind of, not my own, but in concert with like a club for like those of us who have, certain values. It's open to everyone, but just to be very clear, like, hey, we're not going to tolerate like fascist crap, right? Like, we're not here to pound on other people, but rather to defend what we believe is people's right to exist and be free, and it's, I guess for me, like, even just, again, I think about it like two very basic things, like introspection and using what you've learned about from martial arts, about who you are and what you value, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are. Even just that self-awareness is powerful. And then again, the sort of courage and the bravery and the vulnerability to be in community with others, and to also still be imperfect, but that you're willing to practice. You're willing to say, like, okay, I didn't know about all this political stuff before, but I'm willing to practice and learn. I'm willing to read. I'm willing to, in a way, train my mind to think a little differently so that I can be of service. And I think that's what's missing. It's like this idea that we can train ourselves to be of service to higher values than what our culture is presenting. So it's a good question. It's making me all philosophical. And I will say one thing, like, I think as a woman, obviously, it's a very, I don't get the opportunity to train with a whole lot of women, particularly my size. I'm about like 5'8", 150 right now. So like, I hang with a lot of dudes. And I think as a woman, there tends to be a preoccupation in some ways with like martial arts only being self-defense and only so that like we're just doing it to protect ourselves. And I'm like, yeah, okay, like I know how to throw an elbow, like I probably could, but it's also, I think, like I said in one of my last pieces, it's a profound sense of finding your own power and agency, and learning how to be okay with I see aggression. I see aggression like as neutral in this sense. Like again, these things are sports, right? There's rules to the sports, like, and part of the rules are you have to overcome maybe who you are outside the ring and become something different. And I think inside the ring, and I think that's interesting. I think particularly for women that like we're taught to be, demure, not even not show emotion, but not show exertion, always to be perfect. And I think that in this time, uh, perfection is what's going to get us all killed because um right now we have to be willing to be uncomfortable and get some things wrong and be messy because we have not seen what we were seeing like this before, right? Like, so I think particularly for women, it's a powerful way to not only have a sense of agency, but man, it's fun. It's fun to like, there's a lot to be angry about. And there's a lot to like, I keep saying, I'm like, I do this so that like I don't get arrested like on the streets. Like, this is instead of putting away our anger and rage, because the correct response to injustice is anger. If you are angry at what's happening, it means your compass is functioning. But it's a matter of like martial arts teaches you how to focus that anger. That's what I do in my pieces. A lot of people are like, oh, your pieces are so powerful. And I'm like, yeah, because I'm angry about a lot of stuff, but I've turned it into something eloquent and within 800 words. So I think even just that practice of focusing one's energy, whether that's in the ring or whether that's like focusing your mind and getting off of social media and doom scrolling and being like, what is the one thing I can do to help my neighbors? Like that focus, particularly for like feminine rage, which I think is justified right now as our rights are being taken away and as Black women are being purged from jobs. Like, yeah, damn right we should be angry. You might as well make friends while punching things. Right. That's my like evangelizing for more women to join me.
I just love that you went from high school basketball where throwing an elbow is a problem to Muay Thai where throwing an elbow is a solution.
Exactly, man. I was just like, I just need to channel this differently because I keep getting in trouble and I need to be rewarded for this behavior, not punished.
I think we're all on that same page. Karen, this has been an amazing conversation. You've been super generous with your time. I want to make sure that if there's anything we haven't asked about that you really wish we would have asked about, or just anything that you want the folks to know, I would love for you to take this opportunity to do that.
Sure. I mean, well, look out for like more martial arts stuff for me. I mean, I think for me, honestly, and I mean it when I've actually been reading a lot about what it means to fight right now, what it means to resist, like what it means to to like not to be cliche about it, but to flow like water around obstacles and around rocks. So on my Substack on Golden Hour, I'm cooking up some ideas on how to kind of more incorporate my still continuing journey as a martial artist into politics and culture. So I'll definitely have more space and time to write about that. I will be teaching my class on race and media beginning this upcoming week. So look out for some content again, talking about race. Clearly, like our institutions don't like it, but this is precisely why I should do it anyway. So that's what I'm going to continue to do. So I'll be hopefully like releasing some clips of the conversations that I'll be having with students and guest speakers for people to watch out and follow. And gosh, I mean, what else could I say? I feel like this was profound. And it's just so cool to be able to talk about like sports and wrestling because I don't, believe it or not, it's not something that we often get to talk about in, official Washington. So this is fun.
Well, if you ever want to come back and do just a pure wrestling episode with me and Steve, we'll just talk about wrestling.
Yes.
Yep. We could do a whole episode on the cultural significance of pro wrestling.
Yes,
Leave me out of
please,
that.
I'll
I
do
have
that.
to. I would just
What
be
is your
dead
deal,
weight.
Mike?
I don't know.
His deal is he hasn't tried it, okay? That's his deal. He just hasn't tried it.
One of my training partners that I started jiu-jitsu with eons ago was and is a local professional wrestler. And I don't know, even he, I would go watch him, but even he didn't get me into it. So sorry.
Well, what if I became a pro wrestler? And would
Okay,
you watch me?
totally. 100%. 100%.
Don't be careful what you ask for because I may or may not be thinking about it. There's some pro wrestling schools out here.
Oh my goodness.
I would
Why
watch you in a
not?
heartbeat. In a heartbeat. I was a fan before. I'm even more of a fan now after this conversation.
You're giving me ideas.
Do it.
I actually would like to plug something here. We just saw a major backlash after the Jimmy Kimmel incident where, after what happened to him, the swiftness with which Disney and Sinclair had to fold and buckle due to public pressure was unbelievable. I mean, I don't know if these numbers are official, but I saw it reported that something like 1.7 million people canceled their Disney Plus subscription in a matter of days. Those kinds of small little things, when people ask, like, what can I actually do to fight here? Because not everyone can or should be leading on the front lines, right? Some people are vulnerable. They have family to take care of. I get that. But little micro changes like who you choose to support with your dollars makes a big difference. And I think what we're seeing now is, look, if 2 million people almost are willing to give up their Disney Plus overnight, which I presume they enjoy because they believe it's the right thing to do, then clearly people are willing to at least throw a bit of coffee money, behind their beliefs. So this is my plug where if people here, want to do something small but meaningful to support the right kind of action, pledge for Karen Substack. I'm sorry, Karen. I didn't want to plug this. I didn't want to tell you about this, but
Thank you.
This shit matters. Like, this stuff really, really matters. I think we are seeing a tipping point now where the traditional corporate media that we all grew up in is very quickly losing its power. I think public sentiment is shifting. God, I've just got into Substack recently, and I have not felt an energy like that in the reporting scene in a long time. I think taking your coffee money and instead of giving it to big corporations, giving it to independent media and journalists that make the stuff you want is the smartest thing that you can do to really make a difference that matters for about $10 a month or whatever it's going to come to. So look up the Golden Hour on Substack. Pledge for that. Sign up in a paid tier. I'll put a link in the show notes. So there you go. There's my plug.
Thank you. Could I say one more thing about that, and not just for me personally? I will say, back to sort of Jimmy Kimmel and my firing, like the first outlets that would even sit down with me for a one-on-one exclusive, the TV anchors were not biting for several days. It was independent media first. It was Don Lemon. It was Jim Acosta. Those were some of the Paul Krugman on Substack. Like, those were the first ones. And I had to, it was a bit of a reckoning for me a little bit. Like, wow, is this the future? I've been saying, I think after Washington Post fired me a few days later, my Substack was like rising #1 on Substack. Like, people really like came through, which is incredible. And I was also like, oh my goodness. Like, is Substack or YouTube podcasters, like, are they now the public broadcasters now, right? And just the ability to have conversations like you and I are having, to be able to have those in-depth conversations. I mean, some of the interviews that I've been able to do on independent media have been so profoundly good, asking great questions and not afraid, right? And so I appreciate that. That's a whole kind of, other conversation, obviously, but yeah, that would be it. People ask how can we support you, and the best way probably is to subscribe to my Substack, and that's also where I'm going to be posting updates about be in the Washington Post. So you will hear it from me first, any of the continuing updates in that saga. So yeah, I think we're in an era where if you have been, again, back to being disciplined and practiced, if you have done a good job, I think, over the last 10 or so years with maintaining trust with people, with your audience, especially in a world where you have AI and people are confused about whether things are real, and you have the government scrubbing things and mainstream media is afraid to talk about things. That right now trust is the most important currency. And if there's anything, I like I said, I've been true to who I am this whole time. Have I been perfect? No, but I've been true. And I think right now is really the time. If you're looking to step out and do your own thing, now's the time. Substack has been an amazing audience and an amazing community already. Like they're like, come, the water's fine. Like it's been nice to be in a collaborative environment. Mainstream media often is very competitive, and you're like competing against people for scoops, and people don't want to share and stuff like that. But this space has been really about like, yo, we all rise together. Like, let's cross promote, stuff like that. So anyway, just to piggyback off of that, it's beginning of a new era for me. Professional wrestler, martial artist / Substacker. We'll see how that goes.
We all rise together is a great sentiment to end on. Karen, thanks so much. It was really inspiring and I learned a lot.
Thanks, you guys. Thanks for having me.